Chapter 13. Mel. Dr. Winston turned to her computer and read out loud.
Your brother seemed more reclusive than before. You were feeling good about your job, and there's been no change in your meds.
Sounds about right, I replied. She swiveled a chair around to face me.
So how have you been?
Pretty good, on the whole. Work's been a bit busier than usual, but that's fine. Not too much to handle.
That's good. What's made it busier than usual?
Well, apparently aliens are interested in vacationing on Cape Cod. She raised an eyebrow. I smiled. In order to see a shrink who prescribed my meds, I was obligated to see a therapist. I had to drive to her office in West Yarmouth about once a month. It was a pain in the ass at times, but it had to be done. I've been inclined for almost 5 years, and she knew all about my family history of anxiety, depression, and general craziness. The last real crisis I had happened 5 years ago, when I lost my job at the bookstore. Not my fault that time. They went out of business, unsurprisingly. We both knew that if I stayed on my meds and didn't experience too much stress, my life would proceed more or less smoothly, as much as one could expect, that is. Dr. Winston said,
The county fair UFO. I saw it on the news.
I was there.
You saw it?
I nodded. If you watched the video, that was my footage.
That was remarkable.
People were freaking out, running around, screaming. It was crazy. Brian came with me, but when the excitement happened, I was trapped on the Ferris wheel. Her eyebrow went up. That was fine. I had no idea where Brian was. He went off to get fried dough while Ken and I went on the Ferris wheel.
Who's Ken?
A guy I met at the paper. He's been doing some kind of research on UFO sightings. Anyway, he was helping me look for Brian, who wasn't answering his phone. Eventually we found him, cowering in a porta potty. He was a mess, convinced the UFO had followed him from Truro until I calmed him down. If he starts talking about being abducted, it might be time for an intervention. She sat up and leaned forward slightly.
If that happens, call 911. Don't try to deal with it yourself.
I really don't think it would come to that, as long as he stays away from weed. That just makes his paranoia worse. I paused, shaking my head. Abductions. What the hell is going on with people who believe that?
Well, one theory is that UFOs, or more specifically, being forcibly taken into one, is a kind of protective metaphor for a traumatic event. Something happened to the person, the reality of which they can't face. So they create the more acceptable, in our term I admit, reality of alien abduction. Some theorize it's a combination of sleep paralysis and suggestibility.
Or maybe they just don't get over the bridge often enough.
Well,
she said, trying not to smile. I've always thought that a large portion of year-on Cape Codders are certifiable. What sane person would want to live here year-round? I guess it takes one to know one.
Does any of it bother you?
She asked. Only if the aliens show up at my doorstep unannounced. You know how I am. I don't like surprises, especially if they take the form of uninvited visitors, no matter who they are. I finished up my session with Dr. Winston, set up my next appointment with a receptionist, and headed over to the Cape Cod Times main office. I left my favorite coffee mug there. I blame Russell and wanted to grab it while I was still in Hyannis. With less than a mile to go, I was sitting in traffic on Main Street, a few blocks from my destination. Main Street is lined with eateries and boutique shops that attract tourists like seagulls to fish guts. I found myself stopped in front of the pincushion, and my hand involuntarily went to my nose. My friend and I had decided, probably under the influence of the illicit substances, to get pierced. She wanted her navel pierced, and I wanted another hole in my nose. Her piercing got horribly affected, and she ended up in the ER, and her family blamed the whole thing on me, the bad influence. A couple of shops down, I saw a woman in an original series Star Trek uniform, holding a hand-painted sign with a drawing of a V-shaped UFO. She had written below it, "Beam me up." Couldn't tell if she was being ironic. And why the original series? Did E.T. decide to hit the galactic highway before the next generation debuted? I'd hate to think their vision of humanity was limited to brawling red shirts and scantily clad females. It's bad enough we get invaded by Cape Cod aliens every summer, but now, apparently, according to some, we had to deal with a real thing. If the souvenir trade on Route 28 was paying attention, they'd be stupid to not take advantage of the situation. I could picture it. polyresin ETs and flip-flops and sunglasses standing on a clamshell, shot glasses engraved with bug-eyed alien heads. They could shelve them next to all the great white shark tchotchkes. I finally found a parking spot and ran inside the office. I found Laurie Rudd speaking to Russell Holt at his desk. When she saw me, she said,
"Your UFO footage crashed our server.
We should have put it on YouTube."
I don't know why Bill didn't do that in the first place."
Laurie said. Turning back to Russell, she said,
"See if you can talk to the Falmouth PD or someone from the fair to find out exactly what's going on."
To me, she said,
"Apparently there's some Wampanoag camping out at the fairgrounds, refusing to leave. Something about a sky god or—"
Russell cleared his throat.
"They're probably referring to the Thunderbird, the mythological—"
I cut him off. When were UFOs a part of their culture?
"I don't know."
Laurie said. She looked at a notepad in her hand.
"There were reports of a drum circle and someone burning smudge sticks."
She looked at Russell.
"The fair organizers have been having a hell of a time getting equipment out of there. See what you can find out."
Russell did his best Jimmy Olsen impression.
"Will do, boss."
Brown-nosed twerk. As Laurie was leaving, she turned to Russell and said,
"Oh yeah, before you work on any stringer offers, you'll focus on the tasks at hand, correct?"
"Of course.
he said, standing up.
My job here always comes first.
What stringer offer? I blurted out before I could stop myself.
The story has gone national. The Seattle Times asked me to write a story for them.
Who the hell in Seattle would care about a UFO sighting on Cape Cod? He arranged his face in what he thought was an offended look.
Some people like to be well-informed.
The Boston News Report, why did you do that?
Do what?
You knew I was on the road doing interviews. You could have called me. He lifted his chin.
I'm the designated reporter for that area.
Yeah, but I'm the one who actually saw the thing. I shot all the footage.
It's now our footage. You signed the release.
You know what I mean. You just can't resist any opportunity to get yourself on camera.
I was just doing my job. You weren't available.
I had to leave before I slapped his stupid face. I found my mug in the break room and left. My next stop was Brian's house. He had called me earlier and asked if I could bring him some pan-fried dumplings and chicken fingers. Not exactly health food, but I figured anything that was an improvement on the pizza he normally ate. When I arrived, I dumped the takeout bag onto his kitchen table. There were about a dozen empty pizza boxes stacked up on top of his stove. I picked up the top one. It was empty. How old are these?
A couple of weeks.
Brian said. You've been eating the same pizza for 2 weeks. No wonder you wanted something different. Brian patted his pants pockets, looking for something.
Can you get me some groceries if I give you $20?
I can't. I'm on the way back to the office. Why don't you hop on your bike and go to the market?
I haven't left the house since you got back from the fair.
Why? He ignored me and ripped open the bag of food. He opened a container of dumplings, impaled one on a fork, took one bite, and sat down and began chewing. I could tell he was avoiding eye contact with me. I pressed him again. Brian, why haven't you left the house this week? He stared at the half-eaten dumpling on his fork.
The UFO has been following me.
Uh-oh, I thought. This would be hard to dismiss. He was the only guy on the Cape who had seen the UFO twice. What was that old Joseph Heller quote? Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they aren't after you. From my brother's point of view, it did look like they were following him. I tried to give him some reassurance. Listen, no one is following you, I said, especially aliens.
I saw the reports. People are being abducted.
I tried to calm the turmoil that was going on in my brother's head. Brian, I heard myself say in my mother's voice, no one is being abducted. He rocked back and forth a little as he continued to eat. Look, I said, it could have been a military craft we saw. Who says it has to be aliens? Brian shook his head. I haven't seen any military aircraft like that. Well, he had me there. I didn't have an answer for him. On the other hand, I didn't want to end up his caretaker and enabler. I had plenty of things to do with my life besides bring him food and talk him down from a ledge every week. I stuffed the doubling into my mouth, made sure everything was all right, and headed back to the Orleans office. I'd been mostly working at the Hyannis office this past week, covering the mania over the UFO story. It felt good to be back at our old squeaky-floored office. As I sat down on my desk, Norm appeared, holding something behind his back.
Nice to have you around.
Well, when corporate calls, he smiled.
Welcome back to the salt mine.
I could use the rest, I said.
I made you something.
He showed me what he was hiding, a triangular tinfoil hat. Very funny, Norm.
Put it on.
he said. I stuck it on my head and looked at him. He laughed. Great, thanks, I said. My problem is I have too many thoughts trying to get out of my skull. My brother could use one, though. I left it on my head as I booted up my computer. Norm asked,
So what do you think you saw?
Beats me.
Everyone's been talking about it this week.
I was directly under it, and it seems I'm the only one not getting worked up.
You don't think they're aliens?
I looked at him. I'm trying to remain objective about this.
What if it looked like the ones from War of the Worlds?
What? I said. The first movie or the Spielberg version?
The one with Tom Cruise.
I like the original better. That alien was so strange their first reaction was to hit it with a board. They had an RGB color palette for eyes. That was an alien. Norm smiled.
I'm hoping they'll be more like Men in Black.
Mildred approached Norm and handed him a sheet of paper.
Here are the names of the school committee members you wanted.
She spotted the tinfoil hat on my head and frowned.
We shouldn't be making fun of people with mental illness.
How did I know she was going to say that? I thought. I was determined to wear that stupid hat for the rest of the day. She continued to frown at me. Norm and I exchanged glances.
Well,
He said with a grin.
I've got to get back to work.
He left me there with her. Mildred admonished me.
Some people are so ill they can't tell what's real or what isn't.
I had enough of her PC do-gooder crap, I said. I don't need anyone to lecture me about mental illness. Between my own head and the rest of family, we've got pretty much every diagnosis covered. And I've got the little brown bottles to prove it. Mildred stared at me with a mouth open. Without a word, she turned and went back to her desk. I launched Outlook on my PC and scanned the headers of my recent emails. Did I need any Viagra? Deleted. Selectmen Orleans were proposing revisions to the July 4th parade and fireworks. I'd look at that later. There was something from David Brown of Carlisle Communications Incorporated, the big media conglomerate. I opened it. David Brown, Editor-in-Chief, Weekly World Gazette, Carlisle Communications Incorporated, 301 Elucidation Ave, Boca Raton, Florida. Hello, Melissa. I am David Brown, the Editor-in-Chief of the Weekly World Gazette. Perhaps you already know of us. We publish a weekly paper that covers sensational stories and entertaining facts. I've read some of your pieces online, and I like your style. We'd like to commission you to write a report about the recent UFO sightings over Cape Cod. I'd love to speak to you about the requirements as well as your fee. Please contact me via the phone number in the footer below. Of course I knew that. You couldn't miss the paper in the supermarket checkout line. Their headlines screamed of alien babies and Bigfoot sightings. It was one of the most out-there tabloids on the market. I had to smile when I read sensational stories and entertaining facts. Their facts were certainly entertaining. One of their favorite obsessions was to feature Mantis Man, an alien insect hybrid that tormented people while they slept. He was usually associated with UFO sightings. The image they used was a bad Photoshop job of a praying mantis head stuck on a human body. Normally, I would never call the Gazette, but I was curious about the fee. I was getting slightly behind in my car payments, so I was at least interested in what they offered. I had already written the UFO story once, so how hard could it be? I dialed the number. The phone rang for a bit before someone picked up and said curtly,
David Brown.
Hi, this is Melissa Howard from the Cape Cod News. You sent me an email about a possible story commission? David's voice perked up.
Hello, Melissa. I was hoping you would call. How are you doing?
Wonderful, I thought. He wants to do small talk. I'd throw some snark at him right off the bat and see how he reacted. I pretended to be excited and said, I'm doing great. Did you guys ever find Mantis Man?
Oh, Mantis Man. He's our most popular story. We're always on the lookout for him.
I thought, does this guy believe his own bullshit? David continued.
I've been reading some very interesting reports about what's been happening on Cape Cod. We would like to feature a story on the recent UFO sightings. Would you be up for it?
You mentioned the fee?
Of course. We paid $1,200 for 1,200 words. Could you supply some photos?
Damn, I thought. $1 a word isn't too shabby. I could certainly use the money. David filled me in on what he was looking for. Make it punchy, make it exciting, feel free to speculate on what's been happening, and keep the alien aspect in the foreground. So much for my journalism ethics. I asked him if he felt comfortable hiring someone who was actually wearing a tinfoil hat. He laughed and said they do it all the time. I didn't think he got the joke. After I agreed to do it, he urged me to have it done by this weekend so he could hit his polishing deadline. After I hung up, I felt like I needed to take a shower. Screw it, it's just money, I thought. I tried to convince myself that none of this mattered and nobody cared what I wrote. There was only one problem. I had to admit my sins right away, or I would never be able to live this down. I got up to tell Norm.